And welcome back. Jeff, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network in Fort Dodge, Iowa. Jeff, you are on the air with Congressman Pocan.
Hi, Tom. Thank you. Congressman Pocan, our Governor Branstad just signed a bill that was passed by our Republican House and Senate that virtually stripped the state workers union of just about all their rights. Now they're attacking like health benefits. Could you tell me, Governor Branstad was signing the thing, and there was a representative from Americans for Prosperity there, with all of them with big smiles on their face. And Governor Branstad said that we should refer to Wisconsin and Governor Walker how wonderful for the state of Wisconsin this was. Could you kind of pass on to Iowans what we have to look for by doing the things that Wisconsin did?
Absolutely, Jeff. Thank you for that question. I actually taped a video to legislators in Iowa as you were considering this bill saying, hey, I know Scott Walker came down there and told you how great it is. Here's the reality in Wisconsin. We've got one of the lowest job growth numbers in the upper Midwest. We have the fourth worst roads in the entire country. We've gutted our schools to the point that we have 1/3 of teachers turning over in a year at some of our schools in Wisconsin.
Wow.
People leaving the profession. In fact, our School of Education had, I believe it was almost a 50% drop in people applying to it, even though it's one of the best schools for education in a public institution in the entire country. Huge decline because of how we now treat teachers and our public employees. I mean, look at the roads. If we're not putting money back into roads, a lot of those folks are the people who plow our roads in Iowa and Wisconsin when we have snow in winter. I mean, up and down the line, it has had disastrous effects. It's easy to blame someone. You want to blame someone, but let's remember, Americans for Prosperity is really Americans for some people's prosperity. It's just a few rich folk who want to make sure that they're taken care of and not the rest of us. So when Scott Walker came and said what a great job he did in Wisconsin, I taped that video giving all those stats about the state that I love, Wisconsin, and to watch us be so bad off right now when it comes to K-12 education, when it comes to our roads, comes to our jobs growth. I mean, all this is directly related to the terrible measures that we put forth when we did our bill, which was called Act 10, but we refer to as the period of the uprising back home when that happened. I was still in the state legislature when it happened, Jeff. So this is bad stuff that you're about to do. You're going to see some very negative impacts, and now you just got to make sure that they don't do the next step, which is start taking your public education dollars and try to put them to private schools, because you're already going to be losing teachers and having turnover because of the measures you just passed. You'll make it even worse if you follow us in that line.
Wow. Sam Brownback did something like this in Kansas. He seems to be walking it back now since it's destroyed his state.
These are terrible ideas with short-term thinking. But, you know, in Wisconsin, you got to remember, Tom, Scott Walker doesn't really want to be governor. He's never wanted to be governor of Wisconsin. He's wanted to be emperor of the, well, I guess president. He's always wanted to be the top spot, and he's wanted to run for president since he probably was an Eagle Scout. And, you know, we've been on his ladder to success, but he's done all these measures that look good when you run in Republican primaries around the country, but they've had devastating impacts in Wisconsin, and that's even coming from Republicans that I talked to.
Remarkable. And Vi in Doniphan, Missouri. Am I saying that right, Vi?
Yeah, you are. I like Obamacare. Is it too late to put those risk orders back in?
Well, our battle right now is to try to keep whatever we can keep of the Affordable Care Act, because at the rate that Paul Ryan wants to go, he's trying to get this done 2 weeks from now, give or take maybe 24 hours. He plans on having this initial proposal he has pass the House of Representatives. Now, he's going to have a lot of problems among his more conservative members here. He's going to have problems in the Senate. I think 4 people the first day, Republicans in the Senate, said they didn't support the measure because it's going to hurt states, especially around the Medicaid cuts. So honestly, we could debate elements of the Affordable Care Act right now. The problem that we're going to have is, how you, as they try to get rid of it, repeal it, and come up with whatever they're trying to call a replacement, that we protect so many provisions of it, because the provisions that we're seeing go away that are I think the most onerous are the fact you're going to pay more for less coverage, and especially if you're an older American, the amount that they're going to give you as a subsidy isn't even close to what you're going to need, and those are the people that are going to be most at risk.
Yeah. There you go. So, in other words, this is just a great opportunity to push for single-payer health care. The time has come.
Every single time we look at one of these provisions and the problems they're having and why they don't accomplish, even what the Affordable Care Act didn't accomplish, which is still a lot, where there were some holes, it comes back to why not have a Medicare for all sort of system?
Yeah.
Why not have a system that is more comprehensive, with less cost and less bureaucracy?
Right. Why waste $500 billion a year?
Absolutely.
McWayne in Chino Valley, Arizona. You're on the air with Congressman Mark Pocan.
Yes, Congressman. It seems to me all of the Republicans' arrogance and maliciousness in their legislation and policies is fueled by the art of the steal, the actual theft of our democracy. I'm just wondering, where is the Democratic Party's outrage over an investigation into Kobach's Crosscheck system?
Yeah, I'll tell you, there's a bunch of things we are pushing right now, Wayne. The frustration I have from someone who, spent a lot of time in a state legislature before coming to Congress is, it's said here only if someone in the media decides to report it, so you don't necessarily know what we're all pushing for. And, whether it be on simple things like the whole connections with the interference in elections with the Russians to things like why don't we have a system for redistricting that's a public system across the country? And there are bills put forward to try to do that. How do you get our democracy back by making sure that everyone truly has a right to vote, which is a bill that Keith Ellison and I have, which is a constitutional amendment. Clearly, the interstate crosscheck falls in the line. We have a separate committee led by John Sarbanes of Maryland who's dealing with ethics and election reform, and that's one of the components that we're trying to put out there on a regular basis. So we are putting out the issues because I completely agree with you. I mean, at stake really is our democracy, and a lot of these issues affect that democracy. But the bottom line is, how do you maintain a democracy where your vote matters and they're not trying to do everything they can to try to pick their voters rather than the other way around? So there are measures happening, at least on the House side. I can't speak specifically on the Senate, but I'm sure they are. Our biggest challenge, and I have this very often, is if it doesn't get picked up what we do, first of all, we got to be more creative and get that message out. We're trying to do it, but to make sure that people really understand the extent of the threat to their democracy that's out there.
Yeah, and interstate crosscheck certainly qualifies. We just have a minute before the break, Congressman, so not enough time to get a question on. But I'm curious. It seems that one of the things that Trump is teaching us is that performance art gets coverage. In his case, it's outrage and BS and outrageous claims. The billionaires for Bush were funny. I mean, have you guys ever had discussions about how can we do performance art that'll get attention? Because I get the press releases from the House Progressive Caucus, and you guys are doing great stuff. Nobody knows about it.
Yeah, I say it is a challenge here because one of the things I've noticed in my little time, our ways of protesting, and when I say our ways, overall the Democratic, I think our caucus's ways have been to do these conga lines that delay action, or we go and move adjournment.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, they're the amoebas of protest, right? And they're not getting attention.
Yeah, I think Grayson had it figured out.
When
just
we
be
took over
outrageous.
the chamber and did an all-night sit-in around gun violence, we got a lot of attention, and I think a lot of us are arguing for doing more of that. I think there's been some resistance by some in our caucus, but I live in the theory of you do it and you ask and you apologize later rather than asking for permission first. Right. And I think we need to do more of that.
Okay. Congressman Mark Pocan with us for the hour, taking your calls. His website, pocan.house.gov, P-O-C-A-N. You can tweet him at Rep. Mark Pocan. His personal Twitter is just Mark Pocan, M-A-R-K, P-O-C-A-N. And we'll be back with more of your calls for the Congressman right after this.